Good morning. Live from the campus of the United States Sports Academy in Daphne, Alabama, it's Sports Talk. And I'm Dr. Arthur Ogden, Chair of Sports Management. I serve as your moderator, and this is a production of the Academy and the Department of Communications. This morning's panel consists of Mr. Jack Kerwin, who is our Director of Communications, and Dr. Fred Cromartie, who is our Director of Doctoral Studies. And we're going to talk a little bit about this year's draft. Even though this weekend is loaded with all kinds of things, you've got the fight of another fight of the century is taking place, the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The Kentucky Derby is going to be run. The NBA playoffs will be in full swing. And amongst other things, there's spring baseball for the colleges and universities. So today
don't forget softball.
Oh, we can't forget softball. That's right. And track and field.
That's right.
And tennis. And all the other good sports that all of us have coached at one time or another. The focus on this year's draft has been something other than quarterbacks and running backs. Unlike drafts in the past, which characteristically featured both running backs and quarterbacks, the NFL draft is going to be occupied with wide receivers. A couple of the top wide receivers that we know of are Amari Cooper from Alabama and Sammy Coates from Auburn. Now, Sammy comes from a small town right up on 43 called Leroy. And Leroy is a Class 1A, or are they 2A now? They have had a couple of football, Mr. Football of the Year, and they perennially have a tremendous baseball power. And Amari is from my hometown, Miami, Florida. But that probably is a function of, that is the wide receivers, is a function of the passing game has become so precise and even more predominant in the NFL now. So this year's draft really has fewer quality quarterbacks than in the past. And it's not only that these wide receivers can catch the ball, they know what to do with the ball once they get it. And some of them are big enough to run over the opposing defensive backs. When it comes to quarterbacks this year, there are really only 3 or 4 who are getting any attention. Marcus Mariota of Oregon, Jameis Winston of Florida State, Brent Hundley of UCLA, and Bryce Petty from Baylor. But there is, again, the plethora of really good wide receivers. The draft begins its first round tomorrow, about 7 p.m. Central Time, and rounds 2 and 3 are on Friday, and rounds 4 through 7 are on Saturday. So we're talking about a shift from a focus on quarterbacks and running backs. That leaves the door wide open for gifted receivers. What do you think precipitated such a shift? Well, in college ball,
that's been going on for a good number of years now. We've changed offensive schemes. We've come out with a lot of these offensive coordinators now that like to air the ball out. We have these spread offenses, and you have all of this need for players that can catch the ball in any type of setting, and those kinds of players also that have the speed that can spread the field. And the bottom line is that we all know that for college football to continue to draw the crowds that it does, we had to air it out. Air Coryell. So that's exactly what they've done, is they've decided that it is prudently important to add a core element to their game through their receivers. So this is why we've gone from, the short little guys as receivers to medium-sized guys, and now we have the big guys. The Dez Bryants that can catch the ball, that are big enough to run over people, like you said, but yet they are very, very talented individuals.
Yeah,
so
they're good athletes. I mean,
it creates offense.
Most of them play basketball.
Exactly.
On track team. And these are the tall, lanky, for the most part, these are the tall, lanky guys with wide bodies and really, really good twitch muscles, and they can get the job done.
Well, they also can position themselves against defensive backs where they have access to the ball and they can go up and get the ball. That's part of the game. And we're starting to see that emerge more and more in the professional game, because you see these pro teams. But remember, pro teams are just not going to go out there and draft a wide receiver. They go through a whole plethora of things to address their immediate team needs. Then if there's no one in that position to address those needs, those guys are saying, who's the best athlete on the board? And that's what they're doing.
And I just, we hear about quarterbacks, Jack, and all we're hearing about is Mariota and Winston.
Yeah, just the two of them.
Yeah, and are they what everything seems to be focused on now at the moment, or is there something else?
Well, I mean, what we're talking about, basically the best pool to draw from is the wide receiver crop in terms of if you're looking at the entire draft.
Right.
But right at the top, the only two that are being mentioned are Winston and Mariota, and you can flip-flop a pick, whoever's. I'm not saying that's how I would select them.
Right.
But that seems to be public opinion, and at least what the media is getting from NFL teams, that these are the two guys that everybody is interested in for need.
Yes.
Yeah, and we take a look at last year's draft. Who were the top quarterbacks in your mind? Well, either one of you. It's a trick question.
Well, I still do, because of the potential, Johnny Manziel, so I didn't have a problem with him in the first round. But as you see, that has not worked out. That has not worked out so well.
And what about your selection?
Well, I think the kid should have left last year if he had that opportunity, and that would have been Jameis Winston, because of the fact that he didn't have all that baggage behind him at the time.
Sure.
He was just purely a young kid that had that quintessential package that people look for on a football field. Okay, he could absolutely flat out play the game, but it wasn't possible for him to leave. So that's why.
So let me tell you who from last year's draft class has the highest QBR rating in the NFL.
I think I know this one.
Bridgewater.
Yeah.
Okay.
But see,
well, he was
viewed as another Miami kid. Another Miami kid.
He was viewed as the guy going into the season.
He was viewed by some as the guy. He was viewed by others as he was a bust. He was never going to make it.
But he was way down.
Yeah, he was way down because he did not do well in his pro day deal. So that's the thing. And this is where we get to it, where it's a crapshoot. You got all these guys out here prognosticating, and the fact of the matter is that when it comes down to it, we have a great many players that can make it. We have a great many players that are drafted that don't make it. So it's
the funny thing is it even with all this investigating that the teams do and everything else, it can still come down to a one-game situation, and the difference between Bridgewater and Blake Bortles occurred in the game last year at Louisville, where even though if you look at the numbers, Bridgewater probably had a better game. But Bortles led UCF, Central Florida, back to win the game. He was fantastic down the stretch. He ends up being the third pick in the draft.
And
where Bridgewater drops.
Now he's carrying a clipboard on the sideline.
He starts, but I mean, he's starting for a bad, he's starting for a terrible team.
Real tough situation. I know that every year the draft has some new surprise or something. And I don't know if you saw that movie with Kevin Costner, Draft Day. If you haven't had a chance to see it, watch it. It is a good movie. It really shows the inner machinations of selections on draft day. My question is, do you think that this draft is going to have any excitement or any drama that goes along with it? I mean, outside of the fact that some of these ball players are getting themselves into trouble and 2 minutes before the draft or 2 days before the draft, getting busted with pot in the car or getting arrested for punching a hole in the wall. It's called domestic abuse. It's just.
Yeah, there's going to be a surprise. It's just as you talked about. The guys that got arrested that are for smoking pot or domestic violence or whatever it might be. The bottom line is this is about money and it's about their team's success. So those very guys are very likely to be drafted. Now, they may not be in the first round, but if they're still on the board and they suit a need for a team, those guys will get drafted.
Yeah, they will.
That's bottom line.
Well, the funny thing is we're talking about things being a crapshoot and stuff. there are guys who don't get drafted at all who
Yep.
factor.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
the Butler kid from up in
Malcolm
West
Butler,
Alabama.
West Alabama,
Yeah.
you know, game clinching interception
Yeah.
in the Super Bowl last year. He wasn't drafted. I mean, there are other.
He was a free agent, yeah. And
The kid out of Miami last year, Alan Hearns, a receiver.
Right.
He's ended up starting, or he factors in the rotation for the Jaguars. His first 2 catches were touchdowns, which
Right.
tied an NFL record.
Well, and then you see the shows, ESPN, their 30-30 segment that has profiled some of these long shot kids.
Right.
And one of them is the kid from the Bisons up at North Dakota. You know, that kid has been a star running back for 4 years up there. He's done a great job for them. And now it's time for folks to say, hey, does he fit the mode of an NFL running back? Can he cut it? And because he's got speed, he can catch the ball, and he's a very talented player, somebody is going to probably have it. They probably already have him up on the board somewhere. And he said, let's pull the trigger. Let's take a chance on this kid.
The irony of this is, when we start looking at some of the recruiting that's going on now, the 5-star, somebody made a point that on the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl, you know how many 5-star recruits out of high school were on both teams combined?
It wasn't a high number. It was low.
Like 5.
5. Something like that.
5,
Yeah.
and none of them were starters.
Yep.
You know, back to the point that Fred was talking about, how you know you know, you're talking about the kid from North Dakota. I think one of the reasons that the receivers are such a big deal is there are so many receivers right now coming out who fit what teams are looking for in the pro style. They almost look like, you just look at their numbers, they're the same guy, 6'3", 215, can run like the wind. They're carbon copies. Some are better, you know, better hands, better, you know, running.
Let's look at it too.
Let me add 2 things to that. And I heard Jerome Bettis talking about this. Jerome Bettis said, yeah, I was big when I played at Notre Dame, and I could run over people. He said, the defensive backs are bigger and faster now. He says, so where are the really top athletes going to focus on when they're in grade school and middle school and high school? They're going to take a look at wide receiver because they're getting all the play. The average lifespan or playing span for running back in the NFL now is like 3.5 years.
Yep.
Because they get beat up.
Yes, they do.
Yep.
They get beat up terribly. So
And that's
these
why
good
they
athletes,
And wide receivers are a lot. It's a lot. It's like, what is it? It's like 6-7 years, something like that. So if I'm a kid coming up, hey, I'm going to wide receiver. I get a chance to play a lot longer.
and the sunshine and the sunlight is on the wide receivers now because they're throwing the ball and doing so many different things with it.
Right.
And if you take a look at, you know, I know people.
But it's still a quarterback's league. You got to be able to have somebody to throw that ball to them.
Absolutely. And I was just going to reflect on this year's crop of wide receivers is phenomenal. I had the list here from Sports Illustrated, and they are unbelievable. I mean, these guys, besides Sammy Coates, you have a longer list of wide receivers than you do of running backs.
Yes.
And, you know, for running backs, we've got Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Amir Abdullah, another youngster from Alabama, Jay Ajayi from Boise State, and then Duke Johnson. After that, they kind of tail off. TJ Yeldon is only listed as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th best. Of course, this is Sports Illustrated rating. And they also, and I don't know where they have him listed overall, because they do list the top 300. We don't have time to go through that. But then you take a look at the number of wide receivers. I mean, it's just.
Right. And once you project with
Yeah.
the first round grade.
Exactly.
Yeah. And look, and they're just unbelievable. Green Beckham kind of messed himself up with his off-the-field actions. But, you know, you've got Rashad Green from Florida State, Kevin White from West Virginia, Amari Cooper, Sammy Coates, Devontae Parker from Louisville, and I like Jalen Strong from Arizona State.
He's a Philadelphia kid.
Yeah, and he
His
got
dad
like
played
two and a half-
basketball at Drexel.
2.5 pages of really good wide receivers. And I'm just wondering, you know, you take a look at what's coming up this year in the SEC. I think you're going to see
one of the things that we have to factor in is, if watching the shows and all of the pundits out there and everything, the vast majority of the experts, so to speak, say that on the board for every team this year will be a selection of a wide receiver. It's just, exactly. They're all seeking a wide receiver. And when you go back to TJ Yeldon and that, right now, you know, they're saying that he's probably the 72nd person up on the board and all this good stuff and everything. But the upside is still good about him because a lot of the experts say that he's very versatile. There's more upside for him than downside.
Yeah.
They say the one thing that really hurts him is he runs too upright.
Right.
And when you say you run upright, whose career is pretty much, you know, shot right now. I shouldn't say shot, but he's been traded. We got to see if he's going to be able to bounce back with the Cowboys. Is Darren McFadden.
Right.
Upright runner. And when you're an upright runner, man, like you said, bigger defensive backs and defensive linemen and all this good stuff, they pound you.
Well, you're presenting yourself as a bigger target.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's easier for them to hit you.
That's a tough deal.
Okay, about time to wrap it up. I'm going to ask each of you one question. Number one, who is going to be in the first round, the number one draft? And number two, who would you choose as number one? Jack?
I think Jameis Winston will be number one. You know, in terms of everything I hear about the Buccaneers, and they need a quarterback. At least that's what they feel. And if I was in their position, I probably would make that call. I wouldn't say that he's even the athlete that Mariota is,
Right.
but as a pro-style quarterback, in terms of what he's going to be asked to do, he's a better thrower than Mariota. He's a better thrower than anybody else in the draft.
So is that who you would draft, Joe?
I would if I was in their shoes. Yes.
Fred?
We've run out of time, so I'm going to leave that to the prognosticators and let them make that decision.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Tune in again next week at this time. And thank you for sending in your emails to us. Remember, our email address is sportstalk@ussa.edu. So from the campus of the United States Sports Academy in Daphne, Alabama, have a great day and good luck in sports.